Just want you to know, pluralization has wonderful ideas. Our team, headquartered in Atlanta and gathered around the world, when we stand up and talk and listen to each other, it's wonderful to hear the different accents. It somehow doesn't sound the same. When I hear it in America, Michael Ramsden can read the grocery list and it sounds sophisticated, you know. Accents are great things. Food is a great thing. Values, sometimes you see these things, how they're expressed. I love the way they greet you in India and Thailand, like this, you know. And then you go to some parts of the world and they slap you on the back, you know, say, how you doing, bud? When I was at Texas A&M 10 days ago, you stand up and say, howdy. That's the way you greet them. You know, you feel like putting on a hat and boots and you feel you belong. Pluralization is a great thing. But if pluralization and pluralism is taken to absolutize relativism, then you've got a problem. What do I mean by that? You see, relativism simply can't be true. Now, I know I'm talking to most of you who are probably relativists. It simply can't be true. You'll have your chance in the Q&A time. Why not? If a person says all truth is relative, that either includes itself or excludes itself. If it includes itself, that means that statement is not also always true. That absolutes actually exist. Or one way or the other, the sword works. It either includes itself, which means it's not always true, or it excludes itself, which means it's giving you an absoluteness of testing while telling you there are no such things as absolutes. Let me illustrate this for you. Now, it's going to be a bit tough, but let me do this. If you've read my writings or heard this, I try to do this because I think this is very important you follow this. You see, there are basically three laws of logic, and there are many that stand on them. One of the laws of logic is the law of non-contradiction. That a statement that is contradictory at the core, making two opposite claims, could not be true without qualifying one of the assertions in some way. We do that in a court of law. So I remember years ago in California, I was speaking on a series of talks, and a professor, an American professor, came up to the front and he said to me, I don't like the things you say. He said, I dare you to speak on the subject, why I am not a Hindu, and I will bring my entire class in philosophy and they will tear you to shreds. I said, that's supposed to be a very exciting prospect for me, that I select your subject and your students are going to tear me to shreds. I said, why do you say that? This is an American gentleman, you know. And he said to me, well, I have become one. I have become a Hindu. And he said, and when I listen to you talk about the Christian faith and so on, I just think you ought to talk on why you are not in the religion of your land of your birth and so on. He didn't worry about the religion of the land of his birth, but he was worrying about the religion of the land of my birth. And he said to me, you talk about that and we will take care of you. I said, no, sir, I won't do that. I tried to humor him. I said, I've heard when you take mud and throw it at others, not only do you get your hands dirty, you also lose a lot of ground. He didn't think that was very funny. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I will speak to you on why I am a Christian and let your class come and tear me to shreds. I'll be ready for that. So the next day he came there. You should have seen them coming in, my goodness. The only thing they looked like, they weren't carrying any weapons, but the stairs were enough in that one corner to make me just terrified. So I just looked on the other side and spoke the whole evening. At the end of it, he came forward with this whole entourage and he looked at me and he said, you know what? You may have spoken on why you are a Christian, but you gave some logical reasoning and so on. I can see now why you are not you don't belong to Hinduism, you're not a Hindu, because you obviously don't understand Eastern logic. I said, all right, sir, let me tell you something. You've got a whole entourage behind you. and you're trying to impress them, and I'm going to try and impress them. I don't want this game. Let's go out and have a meal. You pay, I'll pray, and we'll talk. So he agreed, and he said, can I bring the professor of psychology with me? I don't know why, whether he was bringing somebody to study both of us. I said, yes, let's go. So we arrive in this Los Angeles restaurant, and he takes my placemat, the other professor's placemat, the third placemat, and his placemat paper, and he stacks it up because he's going to draw out his argument for me. He started off with this statement. He said, Mr. Zacharias, there are two kinds of logic. Actually, I should tell you, that's wrong. But you don't stop anybody that soon. So you allowed him to keep going. He said there is a Eastern logic and a Western logic. He said in the West we think either this or that. It was the same idea of coherence. You see, we don't want to be, you think either this is right or that is right. And so we have this either or mentality in the West. And so we dismiss anything that doesn't agree with us. And he said, that is a Western way of thinking. I said, no, it's not. He said, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. He said, yes, it is. Finally, he said to me, who are you to tell me it is not? I said, all right, keep going. And then he talks to me about the both and logic. It is not either this or that. It is both this and that, a la Hegel. You know, first you take the thesis, which spawns its antithesis, you put it together and it forms a synthesis. That in turn becomes a thesis, spawns an antithesis, and you get a synthesis, and you keep going in this dialectical way. He said, like Marxism. I said, yeah, the classless society. Nobody ever shows you one. But here it is, both this and that. He said that's an Eastern way of thinking. They don't think non-contradictorily. They think dialectically, both this and that. And he said, Ravi, your mistake was this. When you were studying that Eastern worldview, you studied it as a Westerner thinking either or. You should have studied it as an Easterner thinking both and you would have had no problem looking at all the contradictions in the Eastern worldview. They live with contradictions, not a problem, and so on. So he's waxing eloquent, you know, on all of this. Finally, I took one of his placemats on which he'd scribbled. I said, I have just one question for you. When I'm studying the Eastern worldview, you are telling me that I either use the both-and system or nothing else. Is that right? That I either use the dialectical system or nothing else. Is that right? He didn't even eat his lunch. The psychologist and I had finished ours. He put his knife and fork down, which he had just picked up. And I quote, here's exactly what he says to me. He says, the either or does seem to emerge, doesn't it? I said, yes, sir. Even in India, we look both ways before we cross the street. It is either the bus or me, not both of us. And I said, and you know what you've got wrong, sir? I hate to correct you. Do you know what you've got wrong? You've got it dead wrong. Gautama Buddha used the law of non-contradiction. That's why he rejected Hinduism and his way of thinking. Shankara rejected personal deities because he rejected with the law of non-contradiction to his way of thinking. Anybody who tells you that Eastern philosophers live with the dialectical method have a half-truth. Existentially we do, but theoretically that is not true. Shankara believed rigorously in the law of non-contradiction. His way of dealing was with debates. He debated the opposition. I said, so sir, it's got nothing to do with East or West. It's got everything to do with what is true and rationally tenable. That's the way we look at it. When I was telling one of my former Hindu friends that, he started laughing. He said, that's why you're an apologist and I'm just an ordinary pastor. He said, even though he was a nuclear physicist by training, he said, Ravi, if he'd said that to me, I would have simply said to him, if both and is all you crack it out to be, why can't I use both this and that? Why do I have to use just one of them? He said, you just came for it with the jugular, either this or that. The attack point would have been the same. You live a life of contradiction, it'll break down. It'll break down. You can't have your own law of gravity and say, I'm going to jump, but I'm not going to fall. You can't have your own moral theory and say, I can do whatever I want, and there's no payday someday. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, there are absolutes by which we must govern our lives.